Grief is the sudden flood of explosive light, the gift of feeling pain, then love, then a different pain, the moment shattering of a life dream, a swift reminder to kiss today.
Paula started dying early in the morning, and it took a whole day and the night, and I got in bed with her and held her, and I felt her going slowly. At the time, I felt trapped and in terrible pain, and I thought that nothing good could ever come out of that. It was just pain, 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 and being in a place that was dark and didn't have a shape, and I was not in control. I couldn't change anything. I mean, things happened in spite of all my efforts to change them, and there was no way out. When I was born in Lima. I was around 3 years old when my father left, and I never saw my father. And I suppose that was a big loss in my life, the fact that I did not have a father. And then we started traveling with my stepfather because he was a diplomat. So my life was about saying goodbye to places and people. Finally, when I was 15 years old, I went to live with my grandfather in Chile. And I decided I was never going to move again. I was going to plant my roots and become a person in a place with friends. And I would form a family there. And I did, actually. I married very young. I had 2 children. And I stayed there for a long time until we had the military coup in Chile in 1973. And I was forced to leave. But none of these losses, divorce, exile, not having a father, can be compared to the loss of my daughter, which was, I think, the only time in my life when I just couldn't handle it. I always had the feeling before that when things got really bad, there was a door there and you could escape. You could just turn your back to whatever was happening and run away. I did that during the military coup. I had done that in my life, run away from a marriage that wasn't working or from a job I didn't like. But I couldn't run away from my daughter in a coma for a year.
I first met Steve, on USC campus. That was just shortly after I came to US to attend school. So he introduced himself to me. So I thought, wow, that's a pretty bold, person. So about 2 years after I met him, we were married. We've been very busy, developing both of our career. And meanwhile, raising a family, we have 2 daughters. Also, we did a lot of traveling.
Mr. Safari.
And at the same time, trying to, do investment, because this is part of our American dream, is to come here and make it. And that was what we were doing. Steve, he was always very healthy, never even sick. Then he had some stomach problem, some pain. They found out he had cancer in the colon, and it's already the 3rd stage. So the doctor said, gave him 1 year to live. So our whole family was in shock. As you can see how devastated it must be, because even 5 years afterward, it still hurts. So when he died, it almost seems like this, this dream wasn't worth it. Well, this dream has been shattered because when you achieve the dream, but he wasn't there to share it. All I was thinking of was just, to die. That's the only solution. Because, there's just no way out. I could not, face the world, alone without my partner. The laws, they were just like the dark cloud blocking off the sun. So at that point, I couldn't see any light.
I don't think I really know yet that they're dead. Not really. I mean, the thought, obviously I think about it all the time, but the real thought, the real clear understanding that they're dead will just sometimes come knocking, and I just sort of turn my head away and I say, no, I know, but not right now. I can't think about that right now. The loss, as you know, occurred on September 11th. It was part of the larger national tragedy. All 4 of them were killed in the plane crash of the Pentagon. I look at the loss and I see it as an enormous crater, just a huge crater with, I sometimes visualize it with, maybe 20 miles wide and 10 miles deep, with belching forth sulfurous, black, acidic smoke. I mean, it's just the sort of thing you look over the edge and go, whoa. And yet, this is where I am. I'm walking on the edge of this crater. And something that I believe is that it will not go away. It will not, you don't get over something like this. You get used to it. And there's a big difference.
I met Roosevelt while singing with the Glide Ensemble, Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco. He was sick the whole time. He'd had AIDS at the time I met him for almost 15 years. Still very strong and full of life, but having to fight those battles on a daily basis. As we became closer, he started to share more and more of those things with me, and I just wanted to be there. So the friendship actually grew very deeply, very quickly. Watching someone go through death, I mean, there's two sides to losing someone close to you. There's seeing them go through their death, and then there's the death that you experience and the absence that's in your life after they're gone. The chasm, the enormous space that is left when you lose someone. Death is no longer this thing that's out here. It's in you. It's in your gut and in your heart, and that's, you know, to some people might sound dark, but I don't think that's a bad thing at all. It's really understanding that is something that's out there.
You cannot face death as a member of the family or a member of the community unless you grieve, unless you sob, unless you cry, and unless you mourn, unless you speak out about what is taking place and how it hurts and how you miss the person. Also, you cannot really accept grief unless you get angry. You know, you got to get mad. Something happened here, and I don't fully understand it, but I know one thing, I don't like it.
I was never encouraged to grieve. I didn't know how. When I came back from Vietnam, I was told that for me the war was over, that I should be thankful that I survived, and I should get on with my life. It wasn't like that for me. The war was still part of my everyday experience and my thoughts and my feelings and my sensations, and I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't have a model of how to deal with that, and I thought I wasn't supposed to be experiencing this. I was afraid to tell anybody because I was afraid if I told someone they might consider I was crazy and lock me up. And I knew I wasn't crazy, but I didn't know how to, so I anesthetized. I drank more, I took more drugs, or I used other forms of intoxicants, money, relationships. What I discovered in Vietnam is that death is not heroic. Death is death, it's painful, it's in a faraway place and people die frightened, scared and lonely. And there's nothing heroic in it. And it's not as peaceful often as they portray it in films, and it's certainly not as clean. So they don't tell you the truth. I always also believed that you go away to war, you serve honorably, you come home as a hero, and everything is provided for you. And that didn't happen. All of this is, for me, about loss. It's really reinforcing the fact that I couldn't trust. I couldn't trust the truth in what people were presenting me. I couldn't trust the information. I mean, I learned very quickly not to trust anyone.
When I was 17, I was in the world of kind of juvenile delinquency, and my mom and dad were really in the throes of their addiction, and watching them do their thing, and then my mom subsequently dying was one of the most difficult times of my life. And it really threw me into a whirlwind of addiction and really going off the deep end. A lot of shame and grief and pain and everything that happens in that time when you're that age, 17 years old and full of drugs. that was a surprise to me, how far I could push it away to where I wouldn't even think about it. I would just, whatever I could do to get away from that pain. So the night it happened, I was hanging out on the corner like I would every night, and selling drugs and stuff. And I saw an ambulance at my house. And my mom had fallen. And she had a really bad bruise on her face and her eye. She had hit a radiator. So I asked my mom if she was all right. And she waved me off, and I left. And about 2 hours later, the ambulance was back. She was already being pulled out on the stretcher, and yeah, I never got to say goodbye to my mom. Never got a chance to tell her how much I loved her, that she was like my best friend.
Everybody experiences pain, but not everybody becomes wise from it. Somehow it's different each time, the suffering. And I think only people who really know deep loss can ever tell you that. That it comes paired with everything else you do. Whether it be joy, whether it be love, whether it be tragedy, it'll always be paired up next to it for the rest of your life. My mother was murdered 1985, January 31st at 10 in the morning. I felt very much like, how could anybody do this to someone? How could they do it to us as a family? How could they ruin my life like this? It was excruciatingly painful, and it was very numbing. And I don't think I fully enjoyed anything fully for that 2 years. It was easier daytime because I would try and get lost. But it was harder at night because I had to face myself and face the night, the unpredictable, unending night. This greatest struggle of it all was wondering when I was going to live again, because it felt like I wasn't living. I was just barely surviving, I think, for a long time. And then I remember talking to my sister about it one day, and she said, you're probably going to suffer for the rest of your life over this. And I know it sounds crazy, but that was the best thing that I could ever hear. Because it didn't give me a timetable to have to come back.
Once I was in the hospital in Madrid. My daughter was connected to all kinds of machines in life support, and I was just totally desperate. I remember that I was on my knees in the floor in a corridor in the hospital, and I was crying like a child. And then an old peasant man who was waiting there for his wife, his wife was in intensive care like my daughter was, he forced me to get up, and he said, "Stand up." And I said, "Why this happens to me?" And he turned around and he said, "Why not? Why not to you?" And it was a revelation. I realized that mothers for millennia all over the world have lost their children, sometimes all their children, and they bear it. And why not me? Why am I so special that I'm not going to be in pain? Why am I so special that my children will be safe? I'm not special at all.
Well, I think the first thing I learned was how, fragile life is. Because when you were younger or when you were doing things successfully, and you never thought that you were being vulnerable. Seems like, I have control over most everything. And also all my friends, never look at me as being vulnerable or weak. And sometimes it's just making me feel worse, or angry because, what I really wanted them to really think is that I'm not strong, and things are not okay. But that's a very difficult thing, to tell anybody that you are not strong, that you're not okay. Because most people do the reverse. Even if they are not strong, they're not okay, they pretend to be.
I'm just kind of remembering my mom's funeral. And it was so hard for me because, I was kind of a popular punk in the neighborhood, and all these people had come, and I remember being at the funeral parlor and people just handing me handfuls of pills, it'll be okay, Vinny, it'll be okay. And this is the way we looked out for each other. This is what really taking care of each other we thought it meant.
Once I realized I was not in control and that I had to get through this period somehow, I started to throw overboard everything that was extra cargo. And with my daughter, I had to let go first of her intelligence. Paula had severe brain damage, and she was a brilliant, smart girl. So I knew that that was never going to come back, but I still hoped that she would have some kind of life. Then I had to let go of her grace and beauty because she was paralyzed and her body became deformed and her features changed. I had to let go of her beautiful long black hair because we needed to cut it. We had to let go of one thing after another until eventually we had a corpse in a bed. And we had to let go of the soul and the spirit and the voice and the company and everything else.
I'm convinced that once we accept that death and grief are a part of human life, that is a great step. Because so many people will say, well, I don't want to be around no pain. Pain, it's too much for me, or hurt, or suffering. But it's a part of life. And we need to be able to see it for what it is. It's a thing that occurs, a force that occurs, that sets us free. And I think that's the critical thing.
It's okay. Can we accept that? I don't want to pay the price anymore for not accepting it. It's never as bad as you think it's gonna be as far as facing something, especially facing inward. I was carrying so much baggage with me. And the bottom line was that it was more painful to carry it around for a lifetime than to ever face it. If I had ever known that, I would have totally faced it then, instead of dragging it through 25 relationships in 17 years and everything else that I that had dragged it through.
It's just felt like a real house of mirrors to me, because every time I think I have a glimpse of how to sort of get through, it invariably involves, drawing upon human connection. I mean, that's of course always the ultimate resource for all of us, and that's what I lost, was the lion's share of my network, my community, my family.
During this period, for the first year or two, I've been writing a grief journal. One journal is basically about my everyday insanity. What gone through my mind, what my emotion was in my grief, my pain, my loneliness, my helplessness. And that helps because, I got that feeling out.
I mean, there were times I couldn't find my keys, and I would feel crazy. I would start to yell and scream and cry and rant. And what I discovered is that in that moment I was experiencing loss. I was just learning how to grieve, so that every loss I experienced carried with it all of the losses I had never dealt with. And with support, the support of people who had similar experiences to me, with the support of people who had some theoretical knowledge of what I was experiencing, and then by engaging in spiritual practice. For me, it's been the practice of Zen and Buddhism and meditation, the support I get from meditation. I've learned that I can just sit or walk or take some action in relationship with these feelings, that they don't control me. I don't have to reject them or hold too tightly to them, that they will pass.
Then there was a 12-step program when I got clean. I got clean in 1987, and they started talking to me about my pain. That was the reason for all this use, for all this drug addiction. Nobody had ever cared. Nobody had ever asked me, how are you? What's going on? Are you okay? Sure, I wasn't okay. I was strung out. I was locked up. I was homeless. I was all of these things to all of these people, but nobody ever asked me.
The resource that helped me the most was the love of the people that were around me. I felt very loved by everybody, by the doctor who helped me here, by my husband, by my son, by the little grandchildren who were playing on Paula's bed. I felt loved, and I had company.
When you are long light and taken by the clouds, I will try to remember your eyes and not your hands, your moving close and not the words. And when I have once more filled the attic with the flowers of memory, I will light the candles in hopes that I may forgive, accept, and love again.
There's really only two ways that I know that I got through this loss: faith and love. My brother, one day when I walked in a room and fell apart, he helped me and just let me cry. No explanations, no asking questions, no, just let me cry. So for me, my faith that there is something more than just this life here that we can hold on to. That there is something beyond that. There's something before, there's something after. And again, for me, that there is a God. That all was the rock that I stood on.
I think that when you are going through the pain, we tend to resist it. We close down, we become all stiff like this. And pain is like giving birth. It's a process in which your body knows what to do. Just let the body do it. Let the body express the pain as you do when you are giving birth. That the body is pushing and the body is having contractions and the body is breathing and the body is sweating. Okay, we will go through the same stages when we are in grief. Just open up, breathe. Breathe and let the pain come, because the pain will come and then it will go away. It always goes away. It sort of soaks you totally and you think that you can't take any more, and then more comes, another wave. And it's just like giving birth. And then you say, I can't take one more, and it comes again, and you take it. And then all of a sudden you start feeling better. And you feel that the pain has soaked you like a sponge, and it's sort of dripping and going away, and you're getting back to life. It always happens.
I saw grief drinking a cup of sorrow and called out, "It tastes sweet, does it not?" "You've caught me," grief answered, "and you've ruined my business. How can I sell sorrow when you know it is a blessing?"
There are gifts, and they are huge, deep, beautiful gifts. They're as huge and deep and beautiful as the grief is huge and deep and dark and scary. Through walking through the grief, one step at a time, and I think that's the only way you can do it, you come to a better understanding and appreciation for this life, for your own life, for your own self, and for everybody that you share this life with. And those are all very grand, sweeping terms. On a day-to-day level, you'll have more joy. And it's hard. It's hard to walk through the grief. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Once you go through it, then it's time for you to be lifted up, to be resurrected, to come out of yourself, to come back, to go forth, to do something and be something that you've never been before.
Actually, I think that I have become a better person as a result of this loss, because I come to understand a lot more, what life is, who I am. And then also, I find that I become more forgiving, to myself and to others. And then I also find that I understand for the first time the real meaning of the word impermanence. The only thing that is permanent is that moment you have. Going through all this and surviving it and being able at this point to have a new life again tells me that it is possible. If you hang in there, it is possible. Now, this 5 years later, looking back, I felt that all my prayers, have been answered.
right now I feel kind of stumped. I support the idea that life's adversities present the opportunity for growth and change, and I have always believed in that, and I continue to through this process. This particular loss feels to me so large that even though I'm kind of a wordy person and normally don't have problems labeling or describing things, I am at a loss for words. This is so far beyond anything that I can easily or even with effort get my arms around. That's what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing, trying to really understand it and turn it around as some sort of expression or creation. So I'll let you know. Check with me in about 40 years.
Roosevelt's love is still with me. And I feel it, and I know it, and it grows inside me in new ways, and that's huge. When you see someone struggling for each and every day, when that someone is someone that you love so dearly, it kind of distills away all the stuff and gets you to what really at your core is important. We all know we're going to die, but when you see someone die, and then when you have to go on and live your life without them, it is real. And it's not this theoretical concept or this thing that you know is going to happen or something you read about in the paper. It's real. And why waste time being afraid? That's not to say I'm not afraid anymore, but I have so much more courage in not succumbing to that.
I've always been a control freak, and I want the people around me to be happy and everything to be organized and everything to be clean and safe. Life is messy, and it's not going to be that way no matter how much I try. So now I love my grandchildren, and I love them passionately. But I don't want them to change. I don't want them to be happy. I don't want them to be safe. They will have their lives, and they will go through whatever they have to go, and I will try to be there for them, but I will not be standing in front of them trying to avoid pain, because it's not going to happen, no matter how much I try. Also, I have been able to let go of material things. I really don't care if everything burns down and I have to start again, because I know I can. And I also know what happens when you come to the world. As my granddaughter came, she was naked, and she was just this naked little thing. And when Paula left, she was naked, and there was nothing with her. She went wrapped in a sheet. So what's the point? What's the point of running like crazy after things that you will have to leave behind and don't matter at all? They don't really matter.
I remember being ashamed, so ashamed of my life and everything that happened to me. And then one of my friends told me about Challenge Day. And it sounded great. And I didn't really have a real good idea of what they were doing, but it sounded cool. Just getting real with kids, talking to people really straight. And so I went and seen what they did. 3 months later, I was leading my first Challenge Days. Since then, it's been maybe 25,000 kids. They were dealing with real stuff, real symptoms of oppression. And here's a kid just like me. And you can look in his eyes and you can see his whole life. And my shoulders are soaked with tears. And when I came to Challenge Day, they said, everything you've ever been ashamed of, those are your credits, those are your degrees. Because you're going to be able to relate to more kids than any of us.
How you feeling about today, man? It's cool. Come on, man.
It's exciting.
It's better than the first day, though, right?
Cause you know I'm keeping it married.
So we do this exercise, and we go around the circle, and we complete this sentence, if you really knew me. You know, I give them some examples. If you really knew me, you'd know that at my wedding last month, even though it's been 18 years, I still really miss my mom.
If you really, really knew me, you know that being in this room is like my dream come true. I just want to thank you all for helping me make this dream come true.
So it gave me a way to accept me and see it all as a gift. Without this stuff happening, all of it, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I mean, that's what really sculpted me.
It's like opening a window, or more like blowing the whole house down. It's a new way of seeing and appreciating, and that just opens everything up. And in that way, you live differently. You taste more, you see more, you laugh more, love more, do more, do less. You're more courageous. It's going to a place that once you're there, there's a whole new landscape.
When I was 18 years old, I held a young boy in my arms who was 18 years old. His body was filled with holes. He was pale from shock, pale to the extent that he wasn't even bleeding. I felt such a panic in my being because I wanted to take my skin off and give it to him. I was so afraid he might die. I go often into war zones now, and I work with cultures of violence that want to live differently. I go into war zones to talk about not fighting. I go to the places where I'm especially equipped to go. By doing the work that I do with myself first and sharing with others, what I make an effort to do is give my skin to bandage the wounds that exist in the world.
What keeps me going also is the fact that I can serve, that I can help others. First, by sharing my life and sharing the experiences I have had and what I have learned through my writing. But also, after I wrote a book called Paula, which is the story of my daughter, I decided that all the income that would come from that book and other books would go to a foundation. So every year we award 10 organizations and throw a little party for them in which we all honor Paula, because we wouldn't be together without her. And I always feel at that moment she's present, she's delivering the awards. It is my honor. Thank you, thank you. And it gives me great joy to sign the checks and to plan the year and know that maybe someone will get a scholarship in Bangladesh, or maybe someone will get something in a hospital in Guatemala, or that keeps me going. And I have to tell you, I'm a very happy person. And I carry with me the pain and the loss and the sadness as a second skin, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with being in pain. There's nothing wrong with sadness. It's as good as joy. And you learn from all the experiences of life. I wouldn't like to have a pampered, happy life in which nothing painful ever happened. Why? I mean, what kind of person would I be? I wouldn't know anything about anything if that would have been my life.
I've seen a lot of beautiful things come out of these opportunities we have no idea when the first day of our last year begins. What I would say to my mom if I was given that dreadful night again. I didn't have those last moments. These people might. Why would we waste them on the details? I wouldn't.
And I think that every day of my life, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about my mom, or I'm reminded of her. To go through it means to remember it, to trust again. I think those are like the keys, because if you forget, there's something you lose in the gifts that brought, which is probably every day more precious. Trying to make each relationship real and complete and not save it for tomorrow. That's probably the greatest gift.
And when I thought that I had nothing left, I looked back and I realized that I had the wonderful gift of the love that I had given her. She could not return that love at the time because she was in a coma. And I don't even know if she received the love, if she was aware at all. But she gave us the gift of loving her. And I say us because it was not only me, it was all my family, my son, my grandchildren. All of us poured ourselves into her and all our love for her, and we cared for her. And then when she was gone, we had this shiny gift that nobody could take away. And we knew that that we could extend that to other people as well and to the world. We were left with this love of the world, this love of life, this love of each other that maybe was always there, but we had not experienced the need to prove it or to talk about it or to be aware of it. It was just something that we took for granted. And we never took anything else for granted after that.